Before I introduced our speaker for today, I just wanted to take a moment to explain to you a little bit about what Kairos II is. So Kairos II is an urgent appeal from the Palestinian Christian community, and it was issued in November last year, so 2025. It is once again a call to the global church to stand in costly solidarity, taking political, economic, and theological action to end occupation, apartheid, and genocide. This Kairos document has been issued at a critical time. An existential threat exists not only to the Palestinian people as a whole, but particularly to Palestinian Christians who find themselves as a minority in this land, contemplating the very real possibility of forced complete displacement from this land in the coming decade. We want to be here to be challenged, not to believe in a false logic that there is a balance or neutrality to the situation, that there are two equal sides, Israel and Palestine, fighting over a piece of land in a conflict. This document firmly places that as false logic. And it demands from us a partnership with Palestinian Christians and with the church that goes beyond just some tokens and actions, goes beyond financial giving, and calls on us into real costly solidarity. And I'm sure that Rifat is going to explain a bit more about what that means today. It also looks a little bit wider, not just at the context of Palestine, but the world we live in today. And we know that this is a world where moral values and code, international law, and decent humanity is being eroded every day. And it's being eroded by those who believe in world domination through military might, through power, through empire. And this document challenges us and said there is another way that we can live together in this world. We can build a global movement which is built on the pillars of God's kingdom, of justice, of equality, of security for all, and of seeing the image of God in every human being. So with that in mind, it's my real great pleasure to introduce today to you our speaker, Rifat Kassis. Rifat is the General Director of Kairos Palestine, and he was instrumental in writing not only this Kairos document, but also the original one in 2009. Rifat was born and raised in Beit Sahor in Palestine, and he has spent his whole life working with Palestinian Christians and Palestinian civil society, helping them to gain their dignity and their rights and stay in this land that they call home. Prior to working to Kairos Palestine, he founded and launched Defence for Children International in Palestine, and later on became their international director as well. Rifat, we are really proud and pleased to have you here. It's an honour to call you a colleague, a partner and a friend. And we're really delighted that you can take this time to open this series for us. So over to you, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Friends, colleagues and partners in Kairos Sabeel, UK, thank you for gathering today around this important online study series for the Kairos II document. More importantly, around the living witness of Kairos Palestine II, faith in a time of genocide, and this is how we called it. Let me begin with a simple but profound statement. This document is not meant to enjoy reading it. It is meant to confront us, to disturb us, and to challenge us. So when we ask what is its significance and why we must study it, the answer lies in three interconnected realities. The first one, which Charlotte spoke about, there is a radically changed context, nationally and internationally. But there is also the second point, it's a moral and faith urgency. Because when we talk about the Palestinian and Palestinian Christians, it's really now, it is the urgent for a response and for action. And the third, it is a call to transformative actions. So it's not just to read it, but also to act on it. And I'm going to share with you some points. Uh, my first point is about this radically changed context. And again, what Charlotte said, it is about existential threat. So it is moving from occupation or apartheid to real existential threat, which the Palestinian people and Palestinian Christians are facing right now. The first Kairos document in 2009 was written in a time of deep injustice, but still within a recognizable political framework. There was still talk, although lip, uh, lip service, yeah, talk of a peace process, international law. All this still held some weight. And the Israeli structured violence, though devastating against us, was often described as cyclical. That word no longer exists. The past few years marked a historical rupture. What once described as settler colonial occupation and apartheid has intensified into a genocide, ethnic cleansing, and systematic open-ended violence and destruction. Gaza is not simply under siege as it was during the past 17 years before October 7th. Today it is under genocidal war, and it has experienced near total devastation, with mass civilian killed and maimed, destruction of infrastructure, starvation, and the collapse of the humanitarian and civil systems, especially health and education. The West Bank is undergoing what many describe as a silent genocide and irreversible changes through forcible displacement. I mean, just to mention that today we have around 40,000 people, mainly from Jenin and from Tulkarem areas in the northern part of West Bank, are forcibly displaced. Last November, Charlotte and others, we visited these communities in Zababda. Devastating situation with no assistance, with no education, nothing, completely nothing. But also today, I mean, the settler terrorism is waging. And when we say settler terrorism, we are trying not to disconnect them from the state, because this is the state terrorism. The settlers are part of the state. They are not a group of extremist or lunatic type of people. They are part of the establishment. And this is very important to know and to remember. So this irreversible changes, which will dictate also the future of the Palestinian people and dictate also the future solution of the Palestinian cause. East Jerusalem today is increasingly closed. And I am sure that you had heard the news today about His Beatitude Patriarch Pizzaballa, the Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Patriarch of the Latin Church, and the custodian. They both were prevented from reaching the Holy Sepulchre. So this is for the first time in history, maybe, that the patriarch and the custodian are prevented from reaching the Holy Sepulchre Church. So this is Jerusalem. It's completely closed, exclusionary, and the remaining Palestinians living inside Israel facing also deep discrimination. So the discrimination are facing the Palestinians wherever they are and wherever they reside. And perhaps most importantly, the central Palestinian question has changed. It is no longer primarily how do we end the occupation and apartheid against us, as we used to question in the past. Today, our question, will Palestinians remain on their land at all? This shift from political struggle to existential survival, and this is what makes Kairos II necessary. My second point is about the moment of the moral and theological urgency. It's a faith urgency. Kairos II is significant because it is not just a theological or political document. It is a confessional document of faith written at a time when silence itself becomes a sin and faith failure. It insists on a central truth: faith cannot be neutral in the face of systematic injustice. And I do not exaggerate if I say that this is the most profound statement. You find it in the document. Faith cannot be neutral in the face of systematic injustice as we are facing right now. This is why the document is so important to study, especially for Christians in the UK. And sorry to remind you for your historical role in creating this suffering for the Palestinians. From Balfour Declaration, from the British occupation to Palestine in the 20s till the 40s, the partition resolution, all this put UK in a position to bear the brunt with the Palestinians. The document challenges us, all of us, and at the deepest level, as it rejects the misuse of theology to justify domination, supremacy, or exclusion. It calls for scripture to be read through the lens of the vulnerable and through justice, mercy, and human dignity, not power and the powerful. It also names, confronts, and indicts Christian Zionism and other theological distortions practiced by some mainline churches that enable oppression and injustices. So it's not just Christian Zionism, but we find such a theology in the mainline churches, in some of the mainline churches. In doing so, the document asks a deeply uncomfortable question. Has faith, our faith, become ritual and a tool that justifies injustice, or prophetic one that resists injustice and oppression of people? This is a very profound question which every one of us should answer. This is not abstract theology. It is about how belief systems shape real-world suffering. And the third point I want to share, which also Charlotte spoke about it, how to name reality without ambiguity. Another reason this document matters in its clarity. Kairos II refuses the language of conflict, both sides, or equating the occupied with the occupiers. Instead, it names reality directly as genocide. I know that some people find it very difficult to hear these, but this is genocide. And this is not our invention. This is what the most reputed human rights organizations and human rights scholars decided. Genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, settler colonialism, and forced displacement. There is a structural and systematic discrimination against Palestinians, including those inside Israel. It also highlights the mass detention, including thousands held without trial. If you had the chance to listen to Francesca Albanese, the rapporteur on human rights in Palestine, she submitted her report, I think, last week in the Human Rights Council. She spoke about 18,000 prisoners since the 7th of October. All of them, they were ill-treated, tortured, including rape. 100 killed inside the prisons, all out of torture and lack of health care, of course. The destruction of homes, destruction of schools, hospitals, and entire communities, as it's happening now in Masafer, Yatta, and in some other communities. Yanoun, for instance. It's a small village next to a settlement. This was, I mean, they were survived there thanks to the EAPPI program, the ones who from the World Council of Churches. They accompanied the people I mean, try to push the terrorists, the settlers out of that village. Today, it is completely occupied and they just kicked out their people. And let us not forget, and thanks Sharon also, Charlotte, for mentioning this, because today we feel that the Christian communities are targeted in entire Palestine. If you take Palestine, Beit Sahur, for instance, my city, today there is another settlement being built in Beit Sahur, and this will push half of the community out of Beit Sahur. Other villages, also Christian communities, are targeted, like Taiba, Ain Arik, Aboud, Birzeit. All these villages with considerable amount of Christian presence there, they all are under attack. So why is this important, this clarity? Because clarity is not radical or extremism. It is truth and honesty. And without truth and honesty, there can be no justice. And my fourth point is that the document is a mirror held up to the international community. Kairos II is not just about Palestine. It's also about you and all of us. It exposes the failure of the United Nations mechanisms and international system and order. International law is increasingly ignored or selectively applied. Western governments no longer maintain even the appearance of neutrality. Institutions meant to protect civilians are weakened or complicit. And today the civil society is under pressure. You know, I mean, most of the reputed human rights organizations in Palestine, they just closed down because they were designated as terrorist organizations by the Americans and by the Israelis. For UK audience, this is particularly significant because the document asks us all, are human rights truly universal or selectively applied? Are some lives treated as less valuable than others? It challenges us all to confront the gap between stated values and actual policies of our governments. And my fifth point is about the need to move from sympathy to responsibility. One of the strongest messages emerging, both from Kairos II, is that this is not a moment for charity. It is a moment for responsibility. We challenge the world, and mainly Europe, to move beyond humanitarian concern to political clarity. The document calls for consistency in upholding international law, courage in speaking truth even when it is uncomfortable, integrity in aligning actions with values. It urges churches and civil society to move from statements to meaningful pressure, from neutrality to costly solidarity, which also Charlotte spoke about. Costly solidarity. We live in a costly steadfastness and resilience. And we need you, we need your costly solidarity to accompany us. We need to move from abstract concern to concrete engagement. And my sixth point is the document, it is a call to action rooted in faith. Kairos II is not only diagnostic document, it is deeply constructive. It reaffirms forms of creative, nonviolent resistance, which we spoke about in Kairos Palestine document, the first one, I mean. When we spoke about creative resistance, loving resistance, resistance out of love, not out of hatred. We see BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, as a nonviolent tool. It is transparent, community-based, can bring justice to the victims. Come and see is also our call, to come and see our reality and to go to talk about it. We see advocacy and mobilization as a concrete actions, legal accountability, uphold and protection of international law. Today, international law is at stake. Human rights is at stake. We need to protect them. And we need to amplify the Palestinian voices. And that's what you do right now, and we are very much appreciating this. It frames these not as political tactics, but as expression of faithfulness. But also the document, it speaks also inwardly, calling Palestinians to unite, accountability and renewal. It criticizes corruption and called for leadership renewal, affirming the leadership of women, encouraging youth to remain agents of hope despite despair. And it expands the vision further by linking justice with environmental responsibility, connecting the theology of rights with the theology of creation, naming what happened in Gaza as an ecocide, envisioning a future based on equality, pluralism, and shared dignity. And finally, my seventh point is why we must study this document, as you are trying to do right now. And here I can have at least 5 critical things. The first one, it helps us understand reality truthfully in a time of distortion and denial. You know, international media and many media channels, they just distort reality. It helps us understand this reality in a very truthful way. It reclaims faith as a force for justice, not oppression. It challenges complicity, especially within churches and Western society. Silence, justifying oppression, all these are part of moral failure. It also provides a framework for ethical action, not just reflection. Reflection, studying is okay, but we need ethical action as well. It calls us into a deeper, more costly form of solidarity. We know today, and this is also a context changed, you know, for the past years, we witnessed and we saw how our resistance was criminalized, even the nonviolent ones. But today, it's even criminalizing the solidarity movement with the Palestinian people. In some countries, they are, I mean, firing people from their jobs for a post on a Facebook. I mean, in solidarity with the Palestinian people, or dressing a kofiyeh, or raising a Palestinian flag. So this is not a document you can agree with passively. It demands a response. And please let me end with this. I mean, Kairos II, and this is what we keep saying our friends and partners, it is a moral test. As Palestine is a moral test, this document is also ultimately a moral test. It asks, will faith remain a private comfort or become a public commitment to justice? Will we speak only when it is safe or when it is necessary? And this is the costly solidarity as well. Will we treat all human lives as equal in dignity or accept a hierarchy of worth? And perhaps most importantly, will we act? The question is no longer whether we support human rights or not. The question is whether we are willing to act in their defense when it matters most. And today it matters most. Kairos II stands before us as both a warning and an invitation. A warning about the consequences of abandoning justice, and an invitation to rediscover faith as a force for liberation, equality, and life. A faith rooted not in fear, but in truth, not in neutrality, but in justice, not in despair, but in resurrection hope. And thank you.